Beneath the city's heartbeat lies a forgotten pulse, half moon, half monster. Most cities sleep above ground, but not this one. Beneath the concrete, beneath the steel, lurks a forgotten world bound by claws, blood, and prophecy. City unseen, a city cursed. This is the story of a girl and the howl that changed everything. Let's begin. Her name was Ava Monroe, a senior archaeology student with a thirst for secrets and an obsession with maps that didn't match, the kind of girl who found thrill in ruins and silence in the echoes of forgotten places. It began on a humid summer night in the city. A blackout had knocked out half the downtown grid. Ava, backpack slung tight, flashlight in hand, descended into the closed-off section of an abandoned subway line rumored to house more than just rats and graffiti. Her boots crunched glass and ash. Every step took her deeper, beneath the city's pulse. She passed a rusted maintenance door, locked once, now cracked open, and beyond it, a tunnel no blueprint ever recorded. The air changed, thicker, colder, electric with something primal. Symbols etched into the walls glowed faintly, silver spirals, claw-shaped runes, moons divided in half. She should have turned back, but curiosity is a kind of hunger, and Ava was starving. She moved forward, camera clicking. Then she saw it, a monumental archway carved from obsidian stone hidden beneath the city's foundation. Above it, in faded lunar glyphs, Lufinar, sanctum of the moonblood. As Ava stepped beyond the threshold, a sudden pulse of air hit her like thunder. Lights embedded in the cavern ceiling blinked on in a ghostly sequence, illuminating a vast underground city, twisting bridges, moss-draped towers, crystal lanterns glowing with an unnatural shimmer. Then came the sound, a snarl. Shadows moved. Before Ava could scream, figures emerged, eyes glowing amber, bodies rippling with fur and muscle. She had crossed a border few ever lived to speak of. Lufinar, the city below, had awakened, and the prophecy had just begun. They didn't speak at first. The sentinels moved like shadows made flesh, four-legged at first, then rising upright, clothed in tribal armor of bone and polished obsidian. Their language wasn't bark or growl, but something older, resonant, almost melodic. Ava was bound, blindfolded, and carried through twisting corridors lit by hanging crystals that pulsed like beating hearts. When the blindfold was removed, she stood before the high circle, an ancient chamber, circular, draped in avian bioluminescent moss. Thrones of moonstone surrounded a central pit filled with mist. At the center stood Elder Kayla, eyes like molten silver, skin lined with scars that shimmered faintly under the subterranean glow. Elder Kayla said, "Another surface blood dares to enter the womb of the moon." But Kayla wasn't angry. She was afraid, because Ava wasn't just an intruder. She was a key. A hush fell over the chamber as a figure stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, half-transformed, wearing ceremonial armor laced with lunar runes. This was Riven, commander of the Night Guard. His eyes, though fierce, held the storm of a man who had read the prophecy too many times to dismiss what stood before him. Riven said, "She bears the mark. Look at her neck." Ava touched the spot beneath her collarbone where a strange heat had bloomed since entering the city. Now, glowing softly, was a crescent-shaped sigil, the moonborn mark. Kayla's expression darkened. Whispers rose among the council. Some bowed their heads, others snarled and stood. Lufinar was not a city, it was a covenant, and Ava, unknowingly, had just broken and fulfilled a centuries-old pact. Kayla spoke again, slower this time, each word echoing like a tolling bell. Elder Kayla said, "She has awoken the mother's seal. The pulse has returned, the ground has stirred. The moonblood stirs in her veins." Riven turned to Ava. He knelt, shocking even the council. Riven said, "Do you know what you are?" Ava, barely able to breathe, whispered, "I'm just a girl," but that was no longer true. Riven said, "You are moonborn, descendant of Lunai Varela, daughter of the mother wolf, and your arrival marks the fracture, or fusion, of our fate." Behind them, a low tremor shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling. The glyphs pulsed brighter. The prophecy had not been myth. It had been waiting. The city shifted that night. The air grew thick with memory. Lufinar, long dormant, now breathed again, and through Ava, Riven led her through the inner sanctum, past halls adorned with murals of clawed goddesses, moonlit battles, and a figure, wrapped in shadows, with eyes that gleamed like stars, the mother wolf. She was no legend, no spirit of lore. She had once ruled here, worshipped and feared. A force of nature, half divine, fully wild. But the elders turned against her when she sought to merge the bloodlines, human and werewolf, as one. Her punishment, banishment, sealed by blood and moonlight, loomed beneath the very city she built. As Ava walked deeper into the temple's heart, the sigil on her neck flared. Visions poured into her mind, flooding her senses like a broken dam. She saw the mother wolf, standing before a crowd flanked by both werewolves and humans. Her betrayal, bound by silver, eyes blazing as her followers wept. The ritual of the veil. Her soul split and buried beneath the stone to await a moonborn to awaken her. Ava collapsed, screaming. The visions stopped as suddenly as they began. Riven knelt beside her, his voice softer now. Riven said, "She's calling to you, through time, through blood. You've stirred her." But the tremors weren't just in Ava's mind. The city walls cracked. Veins of light pulsed through ancient foundations. In the distance, the sealed chamber known only as the Cradle of Lunai rumbled. A vault no one had opened for centuries. Elder Kayla ordered the city guards doubled. Some whispered of omen, others of war. But none could stop what had already begun. Ava had not just entered their world, she had become its fuse. That night, she was taken to the Library of Stone, a place of silence and prophecy. Scrolls written in claw ink spoke of her fate. She would be tested, she would be hunted, she would choose unite the blood, or let it drown in fire. And as the tremors grew stronger, as symbols all over Lufinar glowed in lunar rhythm, Ava stood before a mirrored pool, where her reflection now shimmered with amber eyes. She whispered, "What are you?" A voice, not her own, answered from within the reflection. "I am what was silenced. I am what will rise. I am the howl before the dawn." The mother wolf was awakening, and Ava was her vessel. Lufinar was a city forged in unity but built on fear, and fear, like blood, stains everything. The prophecy had always been clear. One of surface blood shall bear the mark. She shall open the veil, and through her, the mother shall rise again, bringing either salvation or extinction. Now that prophecy had a name. Ava Elder Kayla summoned a private council in the Chamber of Silver Roots. Half of the elders demanded protection, believing Ava to be the key to healing the rift between worlds. The others, more militant, called for her execution. Better to silence the prophecy than risk repeating the war that buried the mother wolf the first time. Elder Varen, snarling, "She is the crack in the dam." The moment she arrived, the ground trembled. "The old vaults are stirring, do you not see? We are unmaking the seal." Riven, calm but defiant, "Or perhaps we are fulfilling it. She didn't break our world. She belongs to it." The city fractured. Lines were drawn. Packmates turned wary of each other. Whispers filled the tunnels. Some began leaving offerings at the old shrines, the first in centuries. Others sharpened their claws for war. And Ava watched it all unfold with a growing sense of dread. One night, Riven took her to a hidden chamber deep within the moonlit underworks. There, a hollowed altar bore her exact mark, carved 1,000 years ago. Riven said, "The Moonborn have always been hunted, because they bridge what others fear to unite. You carry both bloods in your soul. That is why she speaks to you." Ava softly says, "She wants me to bring change, doesn't she?" Riven said, "Change never comes easy, especially not to wolves chained by their past." As they spoke, another tremor hit, this one violent, cracking a support pillar and causing stone dust to rain like ash. Far away, in the Cradle of Lunai, the mother wolf's prison pulsed, her essence pressed harder against the veil, seeking release. The city could feel it. Time was splintering, and so was Ava. Visions haunted her sleep, some glorious, others drenched in fire and ruin. In one, she saw herself atop Lufinar's highest tower, howling not with terror but with power. In another, she stood amid burning ruins, her eyes feral, her hands soaked in blood. Choice. It had always been about choice, but now, the time to choose was fading, because the mother wolf no longer whispered she was calling. There are rites older than time, bound in blood, carved in bone, and when the Moonborn walks the sanctum, the gates shall open. Ava stood before the lunar chamber, the heart of Lufinar, a colossal circular vault hidden beneath layers of runes. Locked by moonlight and will, she'd followed the visions. The glyphs had lit her path, and now the gate to the Cradle of Lunai waited. Riven stood behind her, hand on his blade, torn between duty and devotion. Riven said, "Once you open that door, there is no going back." Ava, quietly, said, "I was never meant to go back." With blood from her palm, she pressed her hand against the ancient sigil. The crescent mark on her chest pulsed in response. Bright, blinding, the chamber shook. Above, in the ceiling carved from crystal and bone, the artificial moon glowed with spectral light. The gates opened. From within came wind and shadow, a chorus of howls, and then silence. A shape emerged, the mother wolf, towering, ghostly. Her fur shimmered with galaxies, her eyes infinite and ancient, not just a werewolf, but something primordial. The first howl, the alpha of alphas. She didn't walk. She glided as if time parted for her steps. Ava dropped to her knees. The mother wolf, voice echoing from everywhere. "Child of blood split and bound, you have called me forth. Do you come to finish my fall, or fulfill my rise?" Ava, struggling to breathe, said, I want to understand. Why me? The mother wolf, voice echoing from everywhere. Because you are both hunter and hunted, human and beast. You are balance and bridge. The mother did not offer vengeance. She offered something far more dangerous: evolution. A new path, one where humans and werewolves would not hide from each other, but become something greater. But she warned, the surface would not accept peace. They would come with guns, with silver, with fear. Eva closed her eyes. She saw it. Armored humans descending, soldiers storming the caverns, smoke and fire rising through the ancient city. But the howl had already gone out. The surface had felt the pulse. They were coming. Riven stepped forward, sword in hand. Riven said, "Then we meet them on our terms." The mother wolf, nodding, "Let them come. Let them see what they fear, and what they could become." The gates of the city shuddered as distant sounds echoed downward. Helicopters, gunfire. The invasion had begun. It began with floodlights and steel. The city above had awakened to the truth beneath, and as always responded with fear. Columns of soldiers descended through utility shafts, breach points, and old subways retrofitted into kill zones. Drones scanned the tunnels. Silver rounds were locked and loaded. To them, Lufinar was a threat, not a home. Ava stood at the central platform of the lunar chamber, her eyes glowing with the shared power of the mother wolf. Behind her, the city's defenders, Riven, Kayla, and dozens of werewolves in varying forms stood ready. But there was no time for speeches, no room for hesitation. The first blast shattered the gates. War howled through the hollow stone. The clash was savage. Werewolves lunged from above, striking before vanishing into darkness. The soldiers responded with disciplined formations, flashbangs, sonic pulses, silver gas. But Lufinar fought with more than muscle. It fought with memory. The walls themselves shifted, redirecting invaders into traps laid centuries ago. Riven roared across the battlefield, his blade drenched in moonlight, cutting through lines like a phantom. Above it all, Ava watched, not just with human eyes, but with vision deeper, older. She felt the mother within her, a rising tide, a primal force. And then, the moment, a missile, aimed not at the warriors, but at the lunar chamber itself, the cradle, the heart. She moved without thought, lifted by instinct and power not her own. Ava raised her arms. The ground trembled. The artificial moon above flickered, then blazed. A wall of spectral energy exploded outward, catching the missile mid-air. It disintegrated, dust against the will of a goddess reborn. All paused, even the soldiers. For a breath, all was silence. General Rowe, over comms, said, "Fall back, we're dealing with something." Not in the intel, but one man refused to retreat. He stepped forward. General Mark Rowe, the last of a line of hunters sworn to keep the werewolves buried. He locked eyes with Riven across the battlefield. General Rowe said, "You can't rewrite blood." Riven, snarling, "Then bleed for the past." They clashed in the shadow of the mother wolf's form, a blur of silver and claw. Above them, Ava channeled the mother's howl, a sound that was neither beast nor human, but truth. It stopped hearts. It shattered weapons. It echoed across both worlds. And in that moment, the invasion ended, not by force, but by revelation. The humans dropped their weapons. The wolves ceased their roars. What stood before them was not a monster, but a bridge. When the dust settled, the chambers of Lufinar fell silent, not from defeat, but from something stranger, understanding. The soldiers were disarmed, not by claws, but by awe. The city they sought to destroy had shown mercy, wisdom, and terrifying. Parsi General Rowe was taken, not executed. Riven stood over him, eyes unreadable. Riven said, "We are not your nightmare, but we won't remain your secret." And Ava, no longer just a visitor or vessel, stood at the highest tower of the city. Her eyes glowed with amber light. The crescent sigil pulsed beneath her skin. Her voice, once trembled by fear, now carried through stone and moonlight. She spoke to both worlds. Ava voice now echoing, "We have lived in shadow long enough. Let the surface see us, not as monsters, but as mirror." The mother wolf, her true form now dormant, watched from beyond the veil of spirit. Not dead, not gone, just resting until called again. Ava had become the bridge between fur and flesh, between what was and what must come. Above, the world stirred. Whispers spread of a city below, of glowing eyes in the dark, of a howl that was not a warning, but a welcome. Some believed, most denied, but others, those who had always felt different, felt the pull of the moon. They listened. Lufinar was no longer a secret, it was a signal. In time, others would descend, some in peace, others not. But the curse had changed. No longer a burden, now a birthright. Ava, with Riven at her side, walked the border of both worlds, neither human nor wolf, something entirely new. Ava stands on a cliff within the cavern, staring at the artificial moon. Wind howls, so does she, not in fear, but in command. Her howl echoes upward through tunnel and stone until it bursts into the night sky above the city, unseen but not unfelt. The city below still breathes, the prophecy continues, and the next chapter has yet to be written. If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling legends and terrifying tales, make sure to like this video. It really helps us out. You can also click on our Ultimate Werewolf playlist to watch more horror and cryptid stories. The link is in the description below. And if you love horror, folklore, and unexplained mysteries, subscribe to the channel and join our growing community of fear seekers. But don't stop there. Turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Because in the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them. And trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.